Speaking on questions from members of the public, understanding all the quantum. And I understand we have two speakers with us this evening. The first speaker will be Mr. Nigel Eastman. And I'd like to inform him that he has 5 minutes to speak. And then there will be no discussion at the end of the speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the Council for inviting me to speak. I'm Nigel Eastman. I represent about 200 people living on Ottershaw Park Estate. My two central issues are traveller sites and potential development. Both Runnymede and Surrey Heath have issues with traveller sites. For more than 14 years, Runnymede has spent huge amounts of time and money on planning processes, public inquiries and court proceedings. There have been no subsequent enforcement of decisions. When residents on my estate make a planning application, Greenbelt principles are rigidly applied, seemingly with no regard to particular circumstances of the case. We understand the need to protect the Greenbelt, but there is inequality and the law-abiding are disadvantaged. The traveller issue remains because of Runnymede's failure in its legal duty to provide authorised traveller sites. That failure led to an occasion where permission was granted to a site for a fixed temporary period. I and fellow residents attended a planning meeting where, in response to close questioning, Ian Maguire said that temporary means temporary. We know he did because we heard him. And based on that statement, the planning committee voted its approval for temporary permission. I was amazed in response to my emailed inquiry that there were no minutes kept of planning meetings. It is difficult to trust a council that denies access to a record of its committee's proceedings. Moving on to wider developments, it seems Runnymede is in crisis. Ottershaw could be affected by potentially 13,000 houses being built in Runnymede and in the immediate vicinity in adjacent boroughs. Wentworth similarly has 10,000 planned within a 5-mile radius. These are huge numbers compared to a total of 34 houses in the entire borough of Runnymede, as indicated in the 2016 Surrey County Council infrastructure study. This building programme is being drip-fed to residents by a process of assessment, then reassessment, such as to create confusion. I accept that government political and financial pressure is pushing us towards greater development, but the failure of the local planning process has exacerbated that problem. At a planning meeting, Ian Maguire said he was not concerned that central government would penalise Runnymede for abandoning the 2014 local plan, as he'd been in contact, and they knew Runnymede's next proposals would produce notably more houses. I wrote that down at the time, notably more, because I couldn't rely on anonymity. It appears to me that the planning department is building yet more houses to cover its failures and avoid government sanctions. We know that the impact on the infrastructure will be huge. The effect on our already busy roads will be enormous, and health services and schools will be put under increasing pressure. Remember, that is without any consideration of the potential for Heathrow expansion. Ignoring infrastructure issues makes RBC look complacent, even negligent. Residents are seriously worried. They care about their community and question whether the planners do. To quote an Ottershaw resident's email, "The traffic is a joke, the condition of the roads is a joke. The complete inability, it seems, to get a doctor's appointment around here is a joke also. We're concentrating our efforts on moving ourselves and potentially our business out of the area." To briefly mention one other concern, if consultants spend months writing planning papers extending to hundreds of pages, how on earth can anyone but experts be expected to digest and understand them? Information needs to be more accessible for residents and councillors. Lastly, I was offered the opportunity to speak at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That opportunity was withdrawn at 2 days' notice. An agenda item has been included in tonight's meeting, which appears to be an attempt to increase officers' power and reduce councillors' influence. I am told the amendment was introduced in response to a councillor's request for a full review of a traveller site file, which takes us right back to Ian Maguire's temporary means temporary statement. Trying to deny access to information looks like a cover-up and in itself brings the council into disrepute. If Runnymede wants to be seen as fair and equitable, they must not act to restrict access to information. You should not pass that amendment. In conclusion, the issue of authorised traveller sites needs to be properly addressed. The council and council officers need to recognise that residents want a fair system where enforcement is seen to be fair. Runnymede need to engage with their electorate and keep them properly informed in an accessible way. We need better communication, a credible, non-partisan overview of current and potential development. Runnymede need to explain not just why current development proposals are necessary and justified, but also how this new development is going to benefit the residents of Runnymede. Can you persuade them there is any benefit? If you can't, the real gap between council and residents will just get wider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eastland. I now call upon Mr. Mark French, who has 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for inviting me to speak this evening also. I am the Secretary of Brox Lane Residents Association in Oxfordshire. We were one of the groups first invited and then uninvited to address the Overview and Scrutiny Committee 2 weeks ago. Since that meeting, a number of associations representing in excess of 6,000 residents have met to discuss concerns and formulate ideas in order to improve council processes. The question of how to improve the reputation of the planning department remains unanswered. To that end, we would like to see a subcommittee of the ONS established in accordance with section 6.04 of the Constitution. Informal discussions in a task force acting outside of the Constitution will not suffice, as it will lack sufficient recognition. Of immediate concern is tonight's proposed agenda to the constitution of the ONS Committee, whereby your head of law can decline a future agenda item if he deems that it will bring the council into disrepute. We do not fully understand the background to this change, but fear that officers will hide behind the revised rule in order to avoid answering difficult questions. As a council, stop doing the things that bring you into disrepute, and if you do transgress, then it is the purpose of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to scrutinise. Politicians at a national and a local level must be able to ask difficult questions. If you accept this change to the Constitution, you will give up your democratic right to do so. Recent events have brought public scrutiny of your Constitution. We would like to propose some changes in order to make it work better for the community. The ONS Constitution is at best ambiguous. Any constitution that requires a lawyer to explain to its own committee members is in dire need of revision. We would like to see it completely rewritten so that everyone who reads it has a consistent understanding. We will encourage RBC to adopt the crystal mark promoted by the Plain English campaign for all public-facing documents. We also see no reason why agenda items can only be tabled by members of the ONS committee. Extend that to all 42 councillors, as well as members of the public who can provide 10 supporting signatures. Any member of the public should be able to speak at an ONS meeting on any agenda item, be it an information item, scrutiny item, or any other classification. To further transparency, we would like to see the permanent installation of video cameras in these chambers with a recording of all committee meetings. The recordings to be subsequently made available on the RBC website and or YouTube. Turning to accountability, the current complaints procedure requires overhaul. As is common in the private sector, establish a separate complaints team to ensure independent examination. The team should report directly to the Chief Executive and the ONS Committee. Finally, the concept of delegated authority needs urgent review. Recently, RBC offered its support to Surrey Heath for the Fair Oaks Village. Officers advise, members decide. Such a development on Runnymede's boundary will impact thousands of residents and should have been discussed and voted on by the Planning Committee. In closing, Mr Mayor, residents believe that the ONS Constitution does indeed need revision, but not those detailed in the agenda this evening. The Constitution should work for the community and reflect a progressive and transparent organisation to which RBC must aspire. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, there's plenty of food for thought there. I'm now going to move on to the next item in the agenda, but what I will say is we will be discussing changes to our constitution and things later. So you will hear members discuss that one later. The next item on the agenda is item 7, petitions.
None have been received, Mr. Mayor.
Item 8, questions from members of the council under Standing Order 13.
Again, none have been received, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We now move members to our supplementary summons. Recommendations from committees. And the first one is Corporate Management Committee, 30th of March 2017, and the Constitution Review. Do I have a proposal for this item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, proposal for myself. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yes, a proposal for myself standing leader.
Do you wish to propose the item in its entirety as it currently is?
Sorry, apologies for that. So I'd like to propose the items in two blocks, Mr. Mayor. I will explain very shortly, but I would like to remove recommendation 1A, and I would like to propose the rest of the recommendations in two blocks. So B, C, E, F and G as one block of recommendations, and D as a separate vote item, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder?
Second that, Mr. Mayor.
As proposed. Thank you very much. Does any councillor wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful that we're dealing with these in two separate blocks. I have a concern about subparagraph D of the recommendations. The history of this was that there was a meeting of the Standards and Audits Committee in March, and it was proposed in relation to the property acquisitions working group that would be established in the place of the property subcommittee, and the provisions which were recommended by Standards and Audit Committee to corporate management were that the composition of that working group be the leader and or deputy leader of the council, and 4 other members who are not members of corporate management committee, to include 1 member of the Runnymede Independent Residents Group. The purpose of that proposal and the specific provision that the members of the new working group not be members of corporate management was basically to broaden out the decision-making process and the skills that could be offered to what is a very important part of the council's business at the moment. And I understand from Councillor Gillam that certainly as far as the property subcommittee was concerned, some of the meetings were poorly attended. I think it's important for good governance that we do have a vibrant and diverse range of opinions given on property acquisitions, and that we use full use of the skills of councillors here in that process. I would therefore like to propose a motion that we do adopt the original wording, which was the proposal made by Standards and Audits Committee to corporate management, and in reinsert the words that who are not members of corporate management committee.
Can I ask you, Councillor, specifically where you would like that wording inserted? Is it up to 4 other members? Just so I can understand.
It is, yes, 4 other members who are not members of corporate management committee.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to go to Councillor Gillam next, please.
Sorry, I'm seconded, Mr. Mayor, if I may speak.
Second. Do we need a second? Yes, we do. It's a change. Sorry, Councillor Fury. Yes. Do I have a second?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to support Councillor Manduka in this change. I am a member of the Standards and Audit Committee, and this was not the recommendation that we put forward to corporate management. It had been changed. The intent is entirely, as Councillor Manduka has said, to broaden the knowledge and increase the number of councillors who are not on corporate management, who alone, under any other way, actually make the decision themselves. Now, I understand Mr. Gillam has an issue because on corporate management, the independents have one seat, which satisfies the proportionality of the council and its constitution. In this newly revised item D, we've actually included an independent for that very reason as well. Now, Mrs. Gillam has the problem because apparently you, Mr. Mayor, are their expert on property and assets, and I'm glad that you're now aware of this. The intent being that we must have more scrutiny on these items. They're very important. They're in urgent need of being carried out because of the finances going forward for this council. So whilst I recognise Mrs. Gillam's concern, the intent is to extend and increase the number of people who actually review these things prior to going to corporate management. And therefore I have no hesitation in seconding the revision that Councillor Mr. Manduka has put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fury. Mrs. Gillam.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I must correct some inaccuracies. The independent group, Runnymede Independent Residents Group, qualified for 2 members on the corporate management, and we always intend. As for extending the capacity of the number of people to make decisions, a working group does not make decisions. That decision will always come back to corporate management, so I don't see any relevance to that. Over the years, on the property asset group, Councillor Alderson has been our representative. As we pointed out, he has previous experience during his working life in this. But that's not stopped me or other members attending when we have felt it has been of interest. And in fact, I think it's fair to say that there have never been any barriers to any member attending any committee, working group on this in this council. And it is quite embarrassing, really, that so few members do bother to attend these briefings, these working groups. So I don't see any reason for limiting the people who should attend these groups. If the majority group want to put this limitation within their own group, they're quite within their right to. But as far as we're concerned, it's the people who have the skills who should be represented, and anybody else who wants to attend should be able to. And therefore, I thoroughly reject this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Gillam. I'll go to Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Did I understand the deputy leaders say that little IA is being withdrawn?
Correct, that was moved and seconded. Councillor Pan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I would like to support in entirety Councillor Gillam's sentiment. It's about expertise that we bring as a group without any restrictions. Speaking on little a, which is to be withdrawn, I would also like to support that withdrawal. If we look at our constitution at the moment, 2.02a subsection 6 says that members must maintain the highest standards of conduct and ethics. We should not be bringing this council into disrepute in any circumstances, because that's what the constitution says already. That's what we work to already, and that's what we're accountable to already. Thank you.
Councillor Fury, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I must actually go back to what Mrs. Gillam has had to say. The intent is to provide a further subgroup to provide scrutiny on the property issues that will be brought to corporate management. She is absolutely correct. Any member can attend any service committee or any subgroup or any task group, and at the behest of the chairman be allowed to speak. And that request is never withheld. Irrespective of whether people attend or not, this provides a further 5 to 4 people on top of the leader and the corporate management to review and scrutinise the issues that are being put forward. I believe that adds to the strength of this council, rather than restrict it, as Mr. Gillam said. And I do take umbrage with that. We do not restrict anybody from speaking in this council. If you're an elected member, you have the right at any committee meeting to stand up and speak. That is still going on and will remain while I'm a member of this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor I'm going to do, I'm going to take first.
More light.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Mrs. Gill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I too would like to reinforce what Councillor Gillen has said. This comes down to expertise, and to me, by spreading the wider net, if it is expertise only, but it doesn't seem to be that fact at all, it just seems to spread the burden more, which is fine. With all due respect, you can do that when you are the majority group. You must take into consideration and respect our views that we have perhaps the expertise, but in smaller numbers. And I think that perhaps there should be some sort of understanding towards that. And I'm very sorry, Councillor Fury, if you take umbrage at that fact.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Gill. Right, no one else wishes to speak, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take 3 votes. First, can we have a show of hands on items B, C, E, F and G, which are the unchanged items in our agenda? All those in favour of those? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The next vote is on the withdrawal of item A. All those in favour of the withdrawal of item A, please show. Anyone against? And any abstentions? Okay. And the final vote is on the proposed amendment to paragraph D, which was suggested by Councillor Van Duford, seconded by Councillor Fury. All those in favour? Anyone against? I'm advised that amendment is carried. 18 votes to 12.
18 to 12, did you say?
That's what it says.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. We now move on, again on the agenda, to item B, which is H Station Road North, Egham Gateway Development, Procurement of Refurbishment Contract. Can I remind members, if you wish to speak to this, the figures and purchase prices and things are Part 2 items and should not be mentioned this evening because we have public in the gallery. So I'm going to go to Councillor Prescott to propose this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. There's a recommendation on B on page 3. I won't read out the lines and the detail of what the recommendation, but I'll put this forward for resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I have to say that, Mr. Mayor, it's fine.
Thank you. Does any councillor wish to speak? No. See none. So I'm going to go to the vote. All those in favour? Anyone against? And any abstentions? Thank you. Item C, which is Runnymede Regeneration Programme, redevelopment of 168 High Street, Egham. Again, figures are confidential on this one, and I'm going to go to Councillor Prescott.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is a recommendation C on the top of page 4. Again, I won't read out the recommendations, but they are there involved in the middle of the page, and I'll put this forward for resolution.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to say that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any councillor wish to speak? Councillor Mrs. Killen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't let this item go by without reference to previous conversations this evening. Runnymede is in the midst of a very exciting period of council history. I've been around long enough to have seen it providing services in a very adequate and probably more than adequate way. But we've been forced by government, by austerity, by every other issue that's flying around at the moment, to completely change our way of working. We will no longer receive government grant. We have to find an income from somewhere else. We can't ask ratepayers to pay extortionate amounts of council tax. And if we're to carry on providing the services that we do so well, we need an income. This one item tonight is a one very small part of the way that we have changed our way of working. We are now regenerating our properties, regenerating our towns, and deriving an income from those. So I'm very sad that we had the previous conversations. I'm very sad that the residents felt they had to come here tonight and complain about lack of communication and the fact that they distrust our activities in buying properties. To my mind, there's been plenty of opportunities to come along to briefings, to ask councillors, to attend briefings for them and then feed back to the various residents' associations. And there's been plenty of opportunities to get involved in these acquisitions. So I would say to the gallery, use your councillors. They have access to this information. Ask them what's going on. And then you'll, I hope, be reassured that this council is forging ahead, far ahead of many other councils. I attend the Local Government Association in London very often. I meet with councillors from all over Europe. And I'm very proud to be a Runnymede councillor. I'm very proud of what we're doing. We're a very small council and we are fighting well above our weight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Gillan. I would just like to say that was a wonderful piece of hanging, if I could just put that there. Well done. Any other councillor wish to speak? No? Right, I shall then go to the vote on the recommendation, which is on page 4. All those in favour? Anyone against? And any abstentions? And the final, D, yes, the last one, D, Egham Gateway Development Phase 1 Acquisition of Land. And can I just say, as an Egham councillor, I'm really delighted to see so many Egham issues on the agenda this evening. But I'm going to go to Councillor Prescott on this one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is to do with the acquisitions of land. Unfortunately, we can't tell you the exact bits of land that are there, but bits of land are being acquired. And the recommendation is on page 5, and that's you in bold text and
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Right, somebody wishes to speak. Oh no, that was Councillor Maddox. No. Any councillor wish to speak on this item? Right, I shall go to the vote then. All those in favour? So that brings us to the end of the agenda this evening. Can I just say this has been my last full council that I will chair. The next one being the annual council where I will be handing over to the Deputy Mayor. God bless you. And can I just thank you all for your support during my year as Mayor, both in this chamber and outside. It's